Hello and welcome to With Just 15 Defeats, the premier boxing show here on the uncompromising world of YouTube. As the host of the show, I am willing and able to dissect the sweet science here in 2017. My name is Teekosey. Let's get on with the show. Today we're talking heavyweights, but not just that, we're talking the very best 25 currently active in the game today. So that means we're talking the heavyweight rankings for the summer of 2017. Guaranteed to be controversial from the start to the end. And remember, if you have any comments, agreements, disagreements, you hit the comments section below. Let's create the debate today. And if you enjoy the content, remember, please give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe because we'll be having plenty of new content coming. It has been a somewhat barren spell here on the channel and in the heavyweight division generally. But moving forward, there will be plenty of fights announced, and there's no better place to keep informed of how those fights are going to go than with just 15 defeats. I last did the rankings back in January 2017, which did cause somewhat of a controversy around some of the positions of a number of the fighters that I put in the top 15. Now I'm back with a top 25. And whilst there have been a number of disappointments in the last 6 months, I'm talking about the cancellation of a number of biggish fights, such as Hughie Fury and Joseph Parker. We had Shannon Briggs and Oquendo. We also had the Dereck Chisora versus Helenius, and also the O2 undercard where Dillian Whyte was meant to be facing off against Whack. There have been some interesting and compelling fights throughout the division, and because of this, the rankings have dramatically changed. If you watched my January rankings of 2017, you will know that I like to give a more holistic approach to creating my rankings. It's not just based on this guy beat that guy and that guy beat that guy, because that can create a very complex matrix that doesn't really work, because one guy will beat another guy and then will be defeated by another guy. So then who is above who? So I like to give more credit based on what I believe the true ability of the boxers are, based upon recent performances. Now this isn't solely based on the last performance, but performances in the last year or so, with obviously more weight given to the more recent fights. For example, I think a fight that took place 10 years ago has less relevance than obviously a fight taking place in the last 12 months. But we know to be a top level boxer, there are numerous attributes that need to be considered. It's not just skill, it's not just movement, it's not just power, it's not just chin, it's not just stamina, it's not just physique, it's not just shape, being in your prime. All these sort of things are more and more and more attributes that you could come up with that define how good a boxer is. It's more about the combination of all of these, where you are as a prime athlete and a prime boxer. And based upon the performances, I have created a ranking system which I believe is as accurate as any ranking system in the heavyweight division today. So let's crack on with the top 25. I'll go through them, give a little bit of discussion on each guy, and about the halfway point I will be telling you numerous guys who I decided not to consider or I left out for a multitude of reasons. So in number 25 we have Mariusz Wach, the big Polish heavyweight who has a plethora of experience but has fallen short when he's had the big opportunities. Now, in the last 6 months, he has fought Tepa and defeated him on a decision victory. A fighter himself who has deteriorated since the drugs ban. But Wack got the victory, and it looked like he was also going to be fighting Dillian Whyte in London at the O2. That fight never materialised, which was obviously a big disappointment for him. I don't think he would have been capable of beating Whyte, and I think that's the level that Wack is at. I think he's a good gatekeeper for the top 20, but nothing more than that. Next on the list is the big Russian Alexander Ustinov, someone who I've been intrigued by for many years. I think the sheer size of the guy means he is an interesting element in the division, and he does have some skills, and I've seen some pretty good fights. Now, he's lost one, and that was to Kubrat Pulev, but Pulev is a higher level fighter. Apart from that, Ustinov hasn't really been able to get any of the big fights. He was once scheduled to fight Tyson Fury before Tyson Fury took it to the next level, and I think that would have been an interesting fight. However, he's been largely inactive for the last couple of years. I believe that he's been under the impression that he was going to get a title shot, never really materialised, and he came back in 2017 against Rafael Zambano Love and sparked him out in pretty comprehensive fashion. Now, despite being 40 years of age, I think he still has a chance to make it towards the top 15 and possibly cause some upsets. Before Anthony Joshua got his world title shot, I was calling for Ustinov versus Anthony Joshua as a real fight that would show us where Anthony Joshua was at that time, and I think it would have been very competitive, and Anthony Joshua would have learnt a lot out of it. Obviously, I'm not in control of these situations, but it'll be interesting to see after Ustinov has had this marking time fight against Love, whether he can get an interesting fight with a top 15 guy. Next up at 23 is Christian Hammer, someone who I believe many people would think should be higher up in the list, but for me, I think there's so much lacking with Christian's game. And in the last 6 months, he has had 2 outings, one where he defeated David Price by stoppage. I predicted that Price would win that. I thought Price would win it comprehensively, but we all know what happened. Price just completely ran out of gas, and Hammer got the stoppage. He followed that up with a defence of his WBO European title, and as such is on the periphery of the elite heavyweight division. But as I say, I don't see him being a real threat to anyone. We saw the way that he was played with by Tyson Fury about 3 years ago. It was so one-sided, and because of that, I can't see Hammer ever really being able to make that next step up, and as such, I rank him quite low. In 22nd position, we have Dominic Breazeale. He had one fight in 2017, and it was a 5th round stoppage against Agono. Now, if you haven't seen this fight, you need to check it out. Check it out on YouTube. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. It was a real fun fight. Lots of action, lots of power shots, people being dropped left, right and centre until the fight was stopped. Now, Breazeale showed incredible resilience, incredible chin to keep going, and he just outmanned Agono, who most people assumed would stop Breazeale relatively comfortably. So I think in most people's eyes this was a huge upset, but it's shown that he is a tough guy, and he's shown that in the past against Mansour and against Cassie. Admittedly, against Anthony Joshua, it was one step too far. The toughness wasn't there, and I can remember during the Anthony Joshua title challenge, after one round, and I've said this multiple times, after one round, the British commentators were commentating on Dominic Breazeale's durability after one round. But he does have durability, and he's shown that in these fights. Does he have what it takes to ever become a world champion? Probably not. I mean, I believe that he's very limited in his skills, both offensively and defensively. So he will have problems when he fights guys with a lot more movement and a lot more skill. Next up, we have Alexander Dimitrenko, a man mountain. Again, another guy who, when he stepped up to fight top-level guys, he's fallen short considerably, with defeats to Eddie Chambers, Kubrat, Pulev, and more recently against Joseph Parker. However, despite the fact that he was a bit of a bitch about the way that it ended, for me, I think that it should have been a disqualification to Joseph Parker. I've spoken about this in depth. That is my opinion. But anyway, he's come back in 2017. He's had a tune-up fight, and then he fought a rising star in Adrian Granite, and he stopped him inside a round. Again, I'm pretty sure because of the more recent history of Dimitrenko, many people just wrote him off and thought that Granite, as a rising young buck, would be able to get a victory here. Wasn't able to, and Dimitrenko took advantage of that and knocked him out. So for me, Dimitrenko, again, is another guy who will never make it to the elite table, but he will be a good gatekeeper for some of the guys that are on the periphery. Are you good enough to make the next level? And because of the style and the relative skills of Dimitrenko, he will be a good test for a number of these guys. Next up, we have Johann Duhaupas, the French heavyweight, who is a very interesting opponent. We know that he got his big opportunity against Deontay Wilder 2 years ago, and he put up a sterling effort, but was stopped. He does have talent, he does have heart, he does have power, and he showed that when he fought Robert Helenius last year, stopping him. Again, a lot of people thought the tide had turned and Helenius would defeat him. Helenius wasn't able to beat him. He also showed amazing balls, step in the ring with Alexander Povetkin on incredible short notice, which ended up in a stoppage loss. But we know Povetkin has mean power, sickening power, really good skills. So we would have fancied Povetkin even had they had the full training camp. But Duhaupas came back in April 2017, against Gogashvili, someone I'm not that familiar with, but managed to get a stoppage in 3 rounds. And I'm sure he's looking to get back into that scene. Again, like Dimitrenko, like Ustinov. These guys, they're on the periphery. They will have good fights between them, and they will provide good opposition for top-level guys. Next, we have 2 fighters who I believe people will believe should be higher. The first one I'm going with is Andy Ruiz Jr. He hasn't fought in 2017 yet, and as far as I'm aware, nothing has been scheduled. His last fight was the biggest of his career, and it was for a vacant WBO heavyweight title, which in my opinion, I don't think he really should have been in a position to fight for, based on his resume. But we saw him get in the ring with Joseph Parker, and for my money, the fight should have been a draw. I don't think it should have been given to Joseph Parker. We can all agree that it was an incredibly tight fight, and I think realistically, from my point of view, this didn't show the excellence of Andy Ruiz Jr. It more showed that we've been overrating Joseph Parker, or that he underperformed. And because of that, that's why Andy Ruiz is in this position. He really, whilst he had an admirable performance in his failed world title challenge, I mean, the rest of his resume doesn't really show that he's a high-level fighter. And I think he will probably struggle to get the W against any of the top 15, in my opinion. And his visual appearance, which can only be attributed to a lack of discipline, nutrition, all these things, doesn't help his case. I know he has fast hands, but he could be so much better. Next, we have a prospect who I think a lot of people are excited about, but he just hasn't had the opportunity to show it. I believe that he's had a number, had some issues with promoters, contracts, those sort of situations, which have prevented him from fighting. And this is Jarrell Miller. Now, he talks a good game. He usually gets a stoppage. He's a big lad, but he just doesn't have any notable victories that would lead me to agree that he deserves any form of shot at any of the top guys. He needs to be fighting these gatekeepers that I've discussed that are before him. Defeat them in devastating style. Make a statement. And I'm sure it wouldn't help him by shedding a few pounds. He weighed in almost 300 pounds for his last fight in the summer of 2016 against Fred Cassie. I mean, for a 6'4" guy, that's ridiculous in my opinion. Absolutely ridiculous. When we think of the guys that are the super heavyweights, the 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guys, they are not weighing in 296 pounds. They're weighing in closer to the 250. So this guy, he needs to shed some of those pounds. I know that he is an ex-kickboxer, so he has that movement, but shedding those pounds can only benefit him in his goal of being an elite boxer. Next up, we have Helenius. He's only really had one fight in 2017, a marking time fight, which doesn't really, not even worth talking about. I believe he was meant to be fighting Dereck Chisora. That hasn't really come to fruition, which is a bit of a disappointment. I would have loved to have seen that rematch. I mean, for me, Chisora just edged the first one, wasn't given it. But Helenius, if he can get some decent wins under his belt, could be a bit of a danger, a bit of a dark horse for some of the guys. Following up behind him, we've got Gerald Washington, another guy who has a lot of potential. He has the physique. He does have some phenomenal boxing skills. The fight that he had recently was against world champion Deontay Wilder, and I think he surprised a lot of people with his the way that he went about it, the way that he was able to cause Wilder some problems, but ultimately he was stopped by Deontay Wilder, as most people predicted. The guy does have potential. It's not the end for Gerald Washington. I believe that he can come again. Can he be a world champion? Who knows? Can he challenge for a world championship? I think he can get back into the picture for sure. We're now hitting the top 15. So let's just briefly talk about some of the guys that I didn't consider for this. First of all, I haven't considered Tyson Fury in this ranking. I mean, the Ring magazine still have him as the heavyweight champion, but he hasn't fought for a couple of years. He's clearly out of shape. He's clearly not in a position to have any kind of scheduled matchup, so he does not make the top 25. Adding on to that, there's a number of guys that haven't fought for a considerable length of time, and they have not been considered. We're talking about Stavern, Briggs and Oquendo, who had that matchup, but they haven't fought for so long, so I haven't included them. Tava, who I think is listed on one of them, I haven't included him. Jennings, who I do like. I like Jennings. I would love for him to have a comeback, and I think he can be a decent fighter in the top 15. Also, Jones, Glashkov. I haven't considered David Price, obviously. Malik Scott, I haven't considered him because, come on, that last fight, he needs to call it a day. Now, some notable guys that are outside of the top 25, people like Amir Mansour, Manuel Char, Joe O'Brien, Rudenko, Chris Arreola, Agono, Jajai. You've also got prospects like Caballel, Schwartz, Granite, Lipe, Farr, Rivas, Zhang, Fujimoto, and Kanaki. Now, some of these guys could make it into the next 25. We'll have to see how they perform in the next 6 months. So we go back to the top 15. 15th position, again controversial. I'm going with King Charles Martin. Now, we know that he disgraced himself against Anthony Joshua, where he basically walked into the ring, picked up his title belt and handed it to Anthony Joshua and then said, "Punch me in the face." One of the most disappointing world title fights I've watched for quite some time. But having said that, Charles Martin has come back in 2017. He's had a marking time fight, keep busy fight. He got a stoppage in 2 rounds. Now, I think Charles Martin, he does have some attributes that will help him and get him back into that picture. And if he can get some good fights, I think he has some potential. Whether he has the commitment, the drive to actually do so, time will tell, but he is a skilled operator. I predicted that he would handle Klitschko, despite that being, again, another controversial ending. We'll have to see what fight gets scheduled for Charles Martin in 2017. He has to have at least 1, possibly 2 fights in 2017 if he wants to be serious. And I think he's one of the best Americans. Next place goes to Del Boy Dereck Chisora. Now, this is a guy who, what he lacks in talent, he makes up for it tenfold in drive, ambition, heart, will, and desire. You look at his resume, and he's lost every single big fight of his career. It's amazing. Do you know what I mean? He's lost to Fury twice, Helenius, Klitschko, David Haye, Kubrat, Pulev, and Dillian Whyte. It's pretty phenomenal. But he's put up a great performance in many of them. The most recent one against Dillian Whyte was super close. For me, I gave it to Chisora just a hair's difference. I gave it to Chisora. I mean, it probably should have been a draw, but he's there because he can be a problem for anyone in the heavyweight division. And I mean, anyone, he can cause a problem. Can he beat them? Probably not. But will he cause a serious problem? Hell yeah. Next up, I've gone for Carlos Takam. I mean, a lot of people will probably say he's too highly ranked in this ranking system. And yeah, possibly. But he sits above a number of fighters who are questionable. We don't know where they're going to go moving forward. Whereas with Carlos Takam, we know he's a tough SOB with power. And in recent years, he has lost his 2 big fights, but he's given his opponents one hell of a fight. I mean, the Povetkin fight 3 years ago was a serious fight. It was a brilliant fight, an exciting fight, and he went for it. He came up short. Against Joseph Parker, I mean, it was Parker's first real test. I mean, and Parker struggled in my opinion. A lot of people thought that whilst it was a big test, Parker should have been going through and taking Takam out. Didn't come close, whereas Takam really kind of made it difficult and he hurt Joseph Parker. In 2017, Takam hasn't really had fights of any note, but he has knocked out 2 guys. Whether he can get back into the picture through the rankings to fight a high-level opponent, I would like to see him fight someone decent, and I think he'll cause some problems. In the penultimate rankings of this video, I've gone with Tony the Bomber Bellew. Yes, he's known for being a cruiserweight and for most of his career a light heavyweight, but he had the massive fight with David Haye earlier this year, the very controversial fight where, in my opinion, David Haye got the better of him for the most part, even whilst being severely injured. But having said that, the guy could be a legitimate heavyweight contender. Because what we saw, he was just as big as David Haye, if a little bigger. And whilst we know that the heavyweight division is the land of the giants, the land of the super heavyweights, the 6'8"ers, there is still a place for the guys that are 6'3", which is what Tony is. And whilst as he's become heavier and heavier and he's skipped up the divisions, he has become more ponderous, more slower. He has boxing skills that are a lot better than many people give him credit for. For example, I remember back in the day when he was fighting Cleverly for the first time, People were completely writing off his boxing ability. They were saying he only had a puncher's shot. But Tony is a serious boxer. He does have good boxing skills. So for my money, I believe that he would give a cracking fight. It would be good opposition for everyone below him in this ranking. And I think he could fight some of the people above him and cause them problems for sure. So let's round up this part 1 of the top 25 by saying in the 11th position we've got Lucas Browne, Big Daddy, the Australian. Failed a number of drugs tests over 2016 after capturing the heavyweight title out in Russia. I mean, there's been so much controversy about him, you don't know what to believe. But what we do know is that he won the title. I predicted he would win that title, and I think he could be a problem for many fighters out there. He returned in 2017, just a few weeks ago, against the journeyman who he dispatched relatively easily. I thought he was carrying a little bit of timber that I would like him to shed moving forward. But I believe that he has the potential to be ranked and get a big fight. And I think that he would create some exciting fights. He does have power. So that's the first 15 of the, with just 15 defeats, top 25 heavyweight rankings for the summer of 2017. I hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. We'll be back soon with the next installment with the top 10. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Hit the comments section with all your nice comments. Let's start the debate, and I'll see you in the next video.